Gentlemen, Andrew Green from the ABC. Picking up where Brendan left on capability and specifically submarines, by the current projections, we'll be getting the first nuclear-powered submarines for Australia in the late 2030s. Do either of you believe that can be significantly sped up? And what else can we do to meet the submarine capability gap? Specifically, why aren't we looking at an interim capability, a so-called son of Collins?
Mr Dutton.
Andrew, a couple of points. Firstly, the United States hadn't shared the intellectual property, the secret behind the reactor with any other country, and hadn't done so since 1958 when they shared it with the Brits. So the historic nature of AUKUS, and not just the submarine element, but what we're doing in space, what we're doing in AI, quantum, and in many other areas of endeavour is quite remarkable. And I think our country should be very proud of that. In relation to the submarines, I do believe, having been central to the negotiations, to the agreement and the subsequent discussions, that we can acquire capability much sooner than what some of the pundits are projecting at the moment. And we'll have more to say about that if we're elected later in the year. And I think it's quite remarkable that the United States and the United Kingdom have allowed us to conduct the negotiations in the way that they have. We've had people from the US and the UK visiting Osborne here in Canberra, meeting with our experts, and similarly we've had an exchange to London and to Washington. They want us to acquire that capability because they know that it is required in our part of the world. In terms of the capability that we have now, I don't want anybody to underestimate the ability of the Collins class. The Collins class, in its modern form, has a stealth-like capability which makes it the equal of the US and the UK boats. It works alongside them, and it does so in an incredibly efficient fashion, and that's recognised by both the Brits and the Americans. We don't want a third class of submarines, and I know that some commentators continue to write this. The clearest advice I had in relation to our discussions about whether we should go with the nuclear submarines came from the Chief of the Defence Force, the Chief of Navy and the Vice Chief of the Defence Force, not to go with a third platform. And there are many reasons, and we haven't got time to go into them now, as to why you wouldn't do that. And cost is one, but very far down the list. So it is not in our national interest to pretend that we can have a third class of submarine. Somehow we can buy it off the shelf. I want someone to explain to me where this shelf is, because I don't know. I don't know where the submarine shelf is, the used car yard down the road here where, you know, there's an 86 model submarine that's for sale that nobody else has acquired. I'd be down there in a heartbeat. But it's not the reality. Okay. So let's stick to the facts.
Thank you.
Do I get 4 minutes as well, or what?
Mr O'Connor, do you know where the shelf is?
No, look, we want to see the submarines delivered under AUKUS. Anthony Albanese wrote to Scott Morrison and indicated we'd like to be part of a committee, a bipartisan committee, to oversight the 18-month review. Now, the Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, chose not to do that, but we do have a bipartisan approach to making sure we get the best assets possible. And it's not just submarines either, I might add. It's obviously other technologies, and Peter's right, we get access to technologies of the United States and Britain which we've not had before. And that gives us an opportunity to accessing those technologies, to actually invest in research and innovate, invent, and commercialise our own defence assets through that collaboration. So that's the first thing I'd say. In relation to the potential gap or the perceived gap that might exist between now and then, firstly, I would agree with Peter that the Collins-class submarines are very, very capable boats. And to that extent, we should be happy that we've got them in the water and they're working efficiently and we've got the crew. However, if we can bring forward, and Peter sounds confident, but if we could bring forward the delivery of nuclear-propelled submarines, well, that would be a very good thing. Now, in doing that, we need to do a lot of things. It's not just the boat itself. We have to invest in the skills to actually crew those submarines. And I know already the ADF are working with our counterparts in the UK and US Navy to be acquainted with those skills. But we will need to invest a lot more because it takes a lot of effort to find the people, the submariners who are willing to be on those boats, let alone be on the larger boats that stay under longer. But we do need to do it as quickly as we can. And if we can expedite that process, if we can work out a way to deliver those assets, then we should do that. Just in relation to any other capability gap, it may not be needed, and I agree with Peter, that another submarine, but we do need to see whether there's other capability gaps. It might be looking at the Hobart destroyer, whether we need to have more of those. There might be other things. So look, it's very difficult from opposition to make decisions on some of those most significant complex contracts. But if elected, the first thing we would be doing is getting a complete assessment from the National Security Committee of Cabinet, from the ADF, the Defence Department and others about what is needed to be done. Short-term capability gaps, medium, long-term gaps. That will be a priority of an Albanese Labor government.